Hello, this is my poster on the notion of race in America, and my thesis is uh, separating this notion of race into three defining changes in the United States over the 300 years that we were assigned. And the times that I chose were 1619, which is the beginning of the Virginian settlers in the United States colony, the 1800s, when we saw a boom in immigration to America from many different nations, and post civil rights movement, about post 1968 to the present. Now, the reason why I decided to divide the American timeline into these three different sections is because of the key changes that we saw. For our first section of the US history that I'll be discussing, I titled this Developing America because this is before America became a nation in its own right. And this is when different races were, were brought together in one place in America for the first time. Originally, it was just Native Americans. Now we have European settlers. And in 1619, uh, there are Africans who are sold to the European settlers in Virginia. Uh, Now, the original notions of race and race mixing in America began now because this is when different races are interacting with each other. Uh, what we see is the English mindset of this purity, this uh, negativity towards darkness, this idea of not trying to conform to other or have other join the English purity mindset, basically. Um, there was legislature created to prevent race mixing, and there are clear distinctions between the groups. The second time period I chose to uh, divide this history into is what I labeled booming America. America is now a country, and many people are moving to America for prosperity. People from countries that are not limited to European countries. While we did have a lot of European immigration to the United States at this time, we also saw immigration from Asia, specifically from China and Japan, and we see a lot of immigration from Mexico and Latin America into the United States. Not so much African immigration at this period, but we definitely see new racial and national groups joining America. And this complicates, I use that word complicates, not negatively, but this adds more different groups to what America tries to define as this black and white. We now have people who aren't white and they're not black. So where do they fall in America's dichotomy of race? This makes one wonder what is white and who can benefit from white privilege. As we see, there are some European immigrants who are not deemed as white, Italians and Irish at one point. However, they eventually become white. And we see some minority groups, such as Mexican people, are considered white in some cases. However, they don't uh, gain white privilege in other cases. And we also see the pitting of minority groups against each other in this time frame as the white uh, society tries to say that one race is more white or less black than the other. And then the third uh, time frame that I chose is woke America, is how I call it. This is post civil rights movement. Um, Now the social norm is to not be racist and to be inclusive and colorblind, etc., etc. This new social norm goes alongside legal steps that are taken to right obvious injustices in the country, such as segregation and discrimination. However, as I'll explain later, we still see the influences and the impact of the racist constructs that we had in the past. Uh, and also, another key difference in this woke America time period is the potential recognition of multiracialism in the United States and this idea of broadening how we think of race. Perhaps it is actually possible to not just be part of one group, but to have identity in multiple groups or maybe even no group. Um, we see this not just with multiracial people, but with people who are challenging the original titles that that white America had for people. For example, Mina now is referred to as Mina as opposed to um, uh, white or African when there is a better word that would rather describe this group of people. And now I want to discuss how these changes impacted the US population. And I decided to focus on legal changes, social changes, and economic changes. Legal changes, as we know, at the very beginning, there were laws against miscegenation, which is race mixing. However, not a politically correct term now. It depended on your inheritance. If you were not white, you may not have been able to claim inheritances or any kind of funds that were supposed to go to, and of course enslavement based on race. We also have the Jim Crow era, and we also have a change in the legal system during woke America. We have the Brown versus Board of Education, and we now see affirmative action and discrimination lawsuits in the more modern times. Socially, we see at the beginning this dehumanizing, this distancing, this fetishization of non-white individuals. So basically just completely distancing themselves from white people, distancing themselves from the other racial groups that they were presented by. Eventually, as more and more interaction between racial groups increased, this became a hierarchy where white people and other groups were set in place in the society as to who had more power. And as we know, white people had power and they created this hierarchy of who would have more power over who. And segregation, while there are a bunch of different races in America, they could not coexist together. They had to have their separate spaces. As we could see from this drinking fountain sign, where we have white and we have the term colored to refer to non-white. And then in the modern day, we have this equality mindset, this diversity. Everyone wants to be politically correct and inclusive. And surprisingly, all of a sudden, racism is no longer the norm, right? So we see this in this diversity ad in I'm not sure, but the women here in the pink background. And then economically, we see at the beginning and consistently throughout US history, just the white dominance of the economy in America. Uh, this was just a given in developing America as the slaves had no economic power. And the Native Americans were not included in this society to a large enough degree to have power over another group. So it was just complete. The economy was just white. Then it became this kind of systemic economic power in which who was able to own land was controlled, and just a way to legally maintain the status quo. And it's cut off on the screen here, but it says more opportunity, but not perfect. And that's talking about woke America economy. Now it is not impossible for minorities to have financial power and economic power. However, because of the things that were in place in prior uh, periods of time, it is still difficult to own land, to gain education, to break through those barriers. However, it is possible, but it is much more difficult for a person of minority descent than from a person of white descent, based off of these historical historical situations that we're in. And then for the pictures up above, I decided to include two very different time frames. Technically not, because the first picture of the two women here is from a modern day movie, but based on a woman who was trying to. It's this movie called Passing, and she's a black woman, I believe, actually a half black, half white woman who is going undercover as white, and she married a white man, and her her social circle believes that she is white, except for her old childhood friend to the right of her. She knows that she is not actually white, and we see that. And she uses her lighter complexion and dyeing her hair. She uses that to her advantage in order to gain social mobility and financial um, freedoms that she didn't have before. And this is what passing meant originally. And then we see to the right of this picture, we see the rapper Logic, who is part black, part white. And he's more so what we now use the term passing for, where someone is not white, but they pass as white. And passing does not necessarily have to be white, it could be passing as black or passing as Asian or passing as any other race. But as we see in America, most people are trying to be passing of as white, or we refer to it as passing as white. Um, and this in modern times is not always intentional. Logic looks like this. He's not putting anything in his hair or anything like that. But it's interesting how these terms change with time. And as time changes and we go through different periods of time and different things happen, the way that we think about race is going to change as well. Thank you. Bye.